times, Billy Collins, on the Biography channel. Host, me, Billy Collins. Now, we will explore what events transpired to make me, Billy Collins, the man I am today. What events in my life led me to create such beautiful poetry? What things am I up to today? What joy am I bringing to people's lives all over the world? Stay with us, and you'll soon find out.
Nothing to lose.
Leads you to where you are today.
I believe in storytelling.
Gonna make you a star.
I'm still trying to figure that out.
William James Collins was born on March 22nd, 1941, in New York City. His mother, Kathleen Collins, was a well-read nurse who gave up her job to ensure the best upbringing she could for her son.
Living in New York City in his whole youth and being an avid reader of poetry magazine, Billy Collins cultivated a great sense of style. Growing up not of the upper class, but not of the lower class, he was exposed to middle-class life.
His poems generally include elements of the middle-class life. This is perhaps why his poems are so relatable. Here's an excerpt from one of his poems, Man Listening to Disc. This is not bad. Ambling along 44th Street with Sonny Rollins as company, his music flowing through the soft calipers of these earphones. You see, anybody could be in the situation of listening to disc.
In Billy Collins' own words, poetry was an everyday experience. Poetry, to him, was as natural as eating or sleeping. He enjoyed poetry so much that Billy Collins graduated from the College of the Holy Cross with a Bachelor of Arts in English and the University of California, Riverside, as a doctor for romantic poetry.
The period after his graduation and before the publication of his first book is known commonly as the lost years of Collins. While his life during this period remains shrouded in mystery, we can only assume that he spent these years developing a subtle humor. One example of this is in his poem, Questions About Angels.
If an angel delivered the mail, would he arrive in a blinding rush of wings, or would he just assume the appearance of the regular mailman and whistle up the driveway reading the postcards?
Situational absurdity used for the comedic effect is a running motif in his poems.
A self-described late bloomer, Collins published his first significant work in 1980, Video Poems. By this time, he was already the new professor of English at Lehman College at the City University of New York.
Being also in a position of knowledge over others, I can relate to the immense strain of both teaching and writing, but yet Collins manages to find a way to integrate his career in education and his poetry together. Collins frequently uses meta-poetry, poems about poems. One example is in the poem Reading an Anthology of Chinese Poems of the Song Dynasty. I pause to admire the length and clarity of their titles. The title of the poem references itself, an example of meta-poetry.
Collins was now a rising star. He released many books during the 90s, to great critical acclaim. One of the reasons he was such an enduring popularity is because of his readings. Many of his fans were gained for readings of his poems, which frequently sold out.
Colin's style lends itself to being read. Perhaps that is why he is so popular. Colin's poems are informal and conversational in tone. Collins does not seem like a stuck-up, snobbish poet. In fact, through the use of his second person, it feels as if Collins was speaking to you. For example, in his poem, Litany.
But don't worry, I am not the bread and knife. You are still the bread and the knife. You will always be the bread and the knife.
The real seasons there in the poem were very Collins.
Recently, Billy Collins' fame has found him on the receiving end of a six-figure contract. He was the talk of the poetry world for some time after this. As well, Billy Collins was named the Poet Laureate of the United States for one term, from 2001 to 2003.
Poets are generally not very well off financially. Billy Collins, on the other hand, earns a six-figure salary for writing 3 books. How else would he be allowed to get away with this if he were a poor writer? Even though his poetry seems transparent at first, a deeper analysis shows that they are very multi-layered. One example is in the poem No Time. In a rush this weekday afternoon, I tapped the horn as I speed through the cemetery where my parents are buried, side by side beneath a slab of smooth granite. Then, all day, I think of him rising up to give me that look of knowing disapproval, while my mother calmly tells him to lie back down. This concise poem is filled to the brim with ideas including death and remembrance.
Well, that concludes our portrait of Billy Collins. We hope you enjoyed the show. If you didn't, well, let's see you try to do better in a week. Good night. Or day.